What is the difference between INFJs and ENFPs? In this video, we'll go over their main differences and some of their similarities as well. So let's get into it. INFJs and ENFPs are very similar, but there are some key differences in how they process things, feel, and think. The main differences coming from their cognitive functions that are, of course, related to their letter differences. And this really influences what their idealism looks like, what their feelings, their thoughts, all these things look like. So let's kind of take a look at that. So yeah, when it comes to their decision making, INFJs, they make decisions on what they want to do. They have introverted intuition. That's an introverted form of intuition. So introverted future, introverted path, their strategy, where they're going, what they want, who they want to be in the future, their potential character, where they could go. Whereas ENFPs, they make decisions more based on what other people want to do, other people's futures, other people's character. So when it comes to the decision making with the intuition function, ENFPs, they want to support other people's dreams, other people's goals, understand where the tribe or the majority is going. Whereas INFJs, they like to have that little bit of independence, be able to go their own path and decide for themselves what that big picture looks like. Whereas ENFPs appreciate supporting other people's big picture thinking, which makes them very compatible with each other. But overall, they both prioritize things like freedom, creativity, originality, doing things that are new. ENFPs can imagine different possibilities, imagine where things can go, predict things, be very oracular, whereas INFJs, they can predict what they're going to do, but it's a certainty to them because they're going to make a decision and then they follow through in that. So they're more focused on their own path, but being creative with their own path, doing something different. I want to do this, I want to do that, and being able to figure out their own creative decisions that make them who they are. Overall, both of these types desire to make decisions that help others. So taking that intuitive perspective, that very futuristic perspective on where things are going, and relating that to the emotional world, or relating that to the social world, and thinking things might be going in this direction, I might go in this direction. How does that relate to the people in my life, the connections I have, and how can I help people based on those decisions that we or I make? So that's their primary way of thinking about it. And when it comes to emotions, INFJs are slightly different than ENFPs as well. INFJs primarily look to make other people feel things. They look to make other people feel happy, listen to other people's emotions, counsel other people's feelings. Whereas ENFPs, they like to express their own internal feelings, express their, appreciation, express what they like, who they like, why they like them, their values, why they rank certain things certain ways, or like or feel certain things, what's authentic to them, their feeling, their true opinions as well. Whereas INFJs, they're more focused on understanding other people's feelings and opinions. When it comes to their emotional state, overall, both are kind of skeptical with emotions. They're a little bit pessimistic with their feelings. INFJs and ENFPs can feel pretty hard on themselves, be pretty negative, assume bad. These types might assume they're doing something wrong or unethical or immoral because they're very negative when trying to figure out what is good, because they don't want to, have an overly prideful perspective. They don't want to have an inflated sense of self-worth. They want to try and make sure they're responsible and reasonable with how they feel about themselves. So these types kind of think that way, but it can also lead to a lot of negative and depressive emotions, unfortunately. But they prioritize things like harmony, but not at the cost of truth. They do have optimistic thinking functions, TINTE, as we'll get into. They do want to, avoid conflict, avoid disruption, not make people feel bad all the time. They really do care about making people happy, and they have that as a primary motive, but they want to align that with the truth. They do want to be able to spread the truth, spread knowledge, be able to analyze things as well, so it's not at the complete expense of the truth. As we get into their thinking functions, it'll kind of show that. INFJs, they often regulate their thinking quite internally, quite quietly. They're not always going to be saying what they think, sharing their thoughts, because they do want harmony. They do understand, ooh, this person's going to feel bad if I say this. Oh, this person's, their values kind of, disagree with my true thoughts, so I'm not going to say it. But they do have a lot of thoughts. And ENFPs, they express their ideas more outwardly. They externalize their thoughts. They like to have discussions with others, understand what other people think before they're going to say what they think. So they like to really drag those thoughts out of other people, as INFJs kind of need someone to drag them out sometimes. But they're both pretty optimistic about what is true. They can be pretty confident about their intelligence, curious, really energetic about it. They love to learn new things. They love to think things through. It's not necessarily going to be their primary way of dealing with things, but they definitely aren't discouraged from it completely. And they do enjoy, being able to have those thoughtful intellectual discussions as well, being able to kind of philosophize about the future and where things are going. And they really want to fight for the truth and kind of analyze the truth, be able to connect it to their path, find the best path based on what is true, and be able to use those intuitive thinking loops. Then we have their sensory world. Both of these types have kind of a pessimism towards their sensory experiences. They're not necessarily going to be woohoo in the moment, just live for the moment. They can feel kind of negative. They're uncomfortable. They might not feel attractive. They might not feel, like they're normal. They kind of have a negative perspective towards the sensing functions, and this can impact their decision making. They might choose to kind of go in a unique and quote unquote weird path, but really it's just their unique way of expressing themselves, the future they want. They want to align their decisions with that. They don't want to necessarily just do what everyone else is doing or do things because they've been done before. They're a little bit pessimistic about that. They don't care about that as much. INFJs looking more to impact other people, be able to give other people what they need, but sometimes they can sacrifice their own needs. They can sometimes be so focused on other people being comfortable, having a good experience, that they put themselves in harm's way. ENFPs can do a similar thing. They can sacrifice their own needs for what other people want. ENFPs have any hero. They're so focused on giving people what they want, giving that wish fulfillment, that they can sometimes forget to take care of themselves and be responsibly healthy, being able to do something in a more sustainable way for themselves. Both of these types, they dislike obligation, restriction. They don't want to restrict their freedom. They don't want to restrict their mobility. They want to be able to make decisions, whether it's for them or their partner or their friends or, their overall world. They want that freedom. They want to be able to express themselves how they want and have other people express themselves how they want. They don't like that, authoritarian restriction. They really want that freedom. So that's quite important to both of these types, as they are intuitives, being able to have that freedom to connect with others, kind of being the N and the F in their perspective. So that's kind of how it works for them. And then we have their shadow, their more shadowy functions. Both of these types, they do worry about what can go wrong in the future. INFJs worrying more about what other people are going to do, and that other people's decisions will actually screw their decisions over with their NE, whereas ENFPs are worried that their own decisions are going to screw other people's decisions over. So it's very similar. ENFPs worrying that they're going to have a bad future, that they're going to be unlucky, that they're not going to get things, whereas INFJs more worried that something out of their control is going to interrupt their path. So that's, both of their worries being kind of future related, even though they are intuitive types. INFJs can be very hard on their own values, on their own worth, their feelings. They're really, really perfectionistic when it comes to how good they are, whereas ENFPs can be really hard on other people's values. ENFPs really want other people to be good, and they can hold people to very high standards. So yeah, INFJs can have a hard time listening to other people. They have very low extroverted thinking, so they have their own thoughts. They're really trying to analyze things as being true. When it comes to trying to understand other people's thinking and all these different thought perspectives, they can sometimes have a hard time externalizing their thought process. ENFPs can have a difficult time trusting their own thoughts. They're kind of the opposite. ENFPs love to listen to other people and really get those external sources. But when it comes to trusting their own thinking, they can sometimes be a little bit pessimistic about that. So that's just kind of a shadow feature. And both of these types can adopt some bad habits without too much thought. They have very low sensing functions when it comes to influencing other people's habits in a negative way or their own habits in a negative way. They can sometimes do this because they want that freedom, they want that future, but they're a little bit less concerned with restriction in the moment. So that's just kind of a way that they think. So final thoughts overall, INFJs, they make decisions on an ethical basis. They chart their course, they strategize around being able to contribute and help other people, make the world a better place for the future, that NF focus. And they're more introverted as well, whereas ENFPs, we didn't get too much into that, but INFJs definitely more focused on internalizing their own internal world, analyzing, their own internal world, whereas ENFPs are definitely more focused on energizingly. Here we go. As the video ends, I can't talk. ENFPs definitely more focused on externalizing their world and being able to gain information from others, following things on a more personal and moral basis, following their own feelings, what feels good to them. INFJs, they struggle with self-worth, whereas ENFPs can kind of struggle with independence, being able to do their own thing without necessarily getting, that approval from everyone else, being able to be given permission, whereas INFJs can struggle with self-worth, self-approval without being given permission. So they can both struggle with that externally and internally. Both of these types believing in things like freedom, believing in being able to do whatever you want to do, connection, love, being able to, emotionally have the freedom to, bond together and be able to have a better future. These are some of the core values for these types. So I hope this explains kind of the basics of INFJs and ENFPs and how they're slightly different. If you want to hear more on this topic or have me go more in depth on this or any other topic, leave a comment down below and subscribe as well, as it does help the channel. And I hope you all have a great day.